Okay then, so if you're Nairn County, I suspect you've come away from that one thinking we're off the mark, but there were points to improve on, certainly first half, but Steve Mackay, as he kind of said, got a reaction when changes were made for the second period. Strathspey, meanwhile, you're thinking, if we'd taken some of our early chances, it could have been a different game.
Pretty much, I think, Ryan. I mean, it's to wheel out a cliche very early on. It was a game of two halves, really, because I thought watching it that Strathspey were certainly the more threatening team in the first half. I thought their sort of front three, Michael McKenzie through the middle with Ross Logan and Ian Ross either side, I thought they caused a lot of problems. And as we saw in the highlights, they had some good chances. And if you don't take them, harsh reality is you can be punished, and you maybe see the difference slightly. Start of the second half, clear chance comes for Connor Gethins, and the finisher poacher that he is, he puts it away in Nairn. From that point onwards, I thought sort of steadily just grew into it and kind of took a grip of the game really, and they went on and won, reasonably, if you look at the score and end, reasonably comfortably. I mean, I think another difference maker for me was when it was still at 1-0, the subs that Nairn were able to put on, Ben Kelly, Kieran Young, Aaron Nicholson, all in the forward areas. I thought they all came on and made an impact and looked quite lively and looked like they had something to prove. And I mean, you've seen like Kieran Young scored, and Aaron Nicholson created chances, and Ben Kelly was involved in Kieran Young's goal and things like that. So I think those things were the difference. But I mean, Strathspey, as Robert McCormack said, for an hour, I thought they were good first half especially. I thought they were certainly the better team, but need to score when you're on top, unfortunately.
Strathspey, haven't seen them much improved on last season, do you think?
From the evidence I've seen so far, I would definitely say they have improved from last season. They look, to me, they carry a threat, and they're also more organised and more competitive defensively. Although, in saying that, they'll be a little bit disappointed in terms of this margin of defeat as well, because the roof did fall in a wee bit. But I think, again, as Robert McCormack touched on, North of Scotland Cup last Wednesday, they were 1-0 down at half time, conceded a goal within 2 or 3 minutes. 0-0 on Saturday, conceded a goal within 2 or 3 minutes, which those things set you back, and it has put them at a disadvantage in both games. It was interesting as well that James McLaren was on the bench and came on as a trialist. He's sort of been around North football, like Rothes, Devon Vale, Lossiemouth, and potentially Clach as well, I think, for a wee spell. So he's a sort of experienced forward player who, if they can sort something out with him, I think could be a good player to have in their ranks going forward.
To add in another cliche to Callum's opener, it's a goals change games scenario, and you can see that in the highlights. Heads go down among the Strathspey players. The fact they've gone a goal behind, and Nairn go on to hit them quickly again and take full control of the game after that. I think that's maybe just harking back to season gone by, in terms of the heads naturally have gone down at Strathspey in the past when they've conceded a goal, and the first goal is so important for a club like the Grantown Jags, because it totally changes how they're set up. At 0-0, they're in the game, they're creating chances. As soon as they fall a goal behind, it's almost like they take a 10 yards retreat, and it invites the team that's now got their noses in front to come on and add to the tally. But they'll get there. You can see they're a better side, but there's still it's a work in progress. For Nairn, they're up and running now, and Stephen Mackay will be looking for his side to kick on from here, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was supposed to say, do we now see Nairn having maybe got over that hurdle that was perhaps becoming, I don't know, a bit more pronounced than with every game? Now having done it, scored a few goals, and they've kind of in the last couple of games scored goals. Do we now see Nairn more like the Nairn of last season?
Potentially, but I think with a couple of exceptions, what we have seen already this season and what we will see is that it's quite hard to put a sustained run of good form together, potentially out with maybe Buckies and Brecons and sides that you'd expect to be right up at the top end. Like Nairn had a very good and quite long unbeaten run last season, but it'll be tough, I think, to replicate something like that. I do think they'll improve on the back of Saturday. I mean, it was the first goals scored in the league, and I think you could see, again, there's signs of life. I also think maybe a wee bit at the moment, certainly middle to front, they're maybe still searching for what's perhaps their strongest team. Like if you look at game to game, there's been changes here and there, some of them injury enforced and things, to be fair, but I do think it's maybe still a bit of sort of gelling to be done within the Nairn ranks in terms of how we might see them progress.
All right then, well, yeah, another goal scoring performance, I think it's safe to say, from Fraserburgh. My takeaway, Scott Barber has fairly found his form, hasn't he?
He has, but I think in the interest of balance, and I can see this as the Fraserburgh supporting member of this desk, that I think Clach were quite generous in their defending at the weekend, and you can see that, and they've probably picked the worst team you want to be like that against. And Fraserburgh at the minute they're banging them in for fun, and everyone, the confidence is clearly so high in Mark Howie's team going forward at the minute that they're feeling like, well, if we concede one or two, we know we're still capable of getting 3, 4, 5, 6. They're in a good place. Their reaction to losing at home to Bucky has been very strong, and they'll just be looking to keep banging in the goals and racking up the points in the weeks ahead.
I actually thought maybe not all of them, but Clach's 2 finishes were quite good, and Fraserburgh had a few crackers as well.
The free kick for Butcher, the first one's a great goal, and I mean, they give Scott Barber his due. The corners, I mean, not something you see every day going in, but obviously Clach want to be best pleased with that. But I thought Logan Watt's first goal and then Barber's second as well, I thought they were good finishes and good bit, well, if Barber's second, good bit of sort of link up play with Butcher.
I don't think, does it touch the ground after the long ball? I don't think it does. I think Butcher potentially volleys it and then Barber chest.
He heads it to volley it.
Does he head it and then it's like chest and volley from Barber? Yeah, that was my pick, I've got to say.
No, but I mean, as Thirdy's sort of saying, at the moment, their forward players, they're in really good form and causing problems. And I mean, Clach, the issue is just conceding far too many goals at the moment to give themselves a chance. Have conceded 20 goals in the last 4 games, which you're not gonna get much joy if you're averaging 5 goals a game. I mean, obviously not over the whole season, but just the last few games, letting in 20 goals isn't good enough, and that's why they're finding themselves in the situation they're in, where they haven't won a game yet this season, and they're struggling a wee bit, and confidence is taking a wee bit of a knock.
Yeah, interesting to see if they can get out of that. Banks of D1, Lossiemouth 1. Now, I've got to say, Lossiemouth are on an odd run of results. There was running for Martin Close. They then drew with Brora. They then got beat by Strathspey in the Cup, and now they've drawn with another of the big.
Beat by Nairn as well in the North of Scotland Cup.
Yeah, and now they've drawn with Banks of D, and again, like similar to I think the Brora game maybe played it like this as well. They were 1-0 down pretty early through Lachie McLeod, and then they have the fight and the spirit and the character to, find the equaliser late on. Cameron Facker, also a hero for Lossie on the day, saved a Mark Gilmore penalty late on. I suppose on the flip side, it's a frustrating one for D to drop points in, given their position.
Well, I think if you listen to both managers afterwards, Frank McGettrick was definitely the happier of the two. He felt that with the ball, Lossie probably didn't pose as much of a threat as he would have liked, but he felt that in the main they defended well, and Cammy Facker made some good saves, also notably the penalty to keep them in the game. And if you can stay in the game and defend well, you've always got a chance, and so it proved. They scored a good goal through Ross Morrison to equalise, but then on the flip side, you've got Banks of D with Josh Winton was very much in the camp of it's 2 points dropped, and that'll be a frustrating one for them. But I mean, for Lossy, I know they haven't won yet, but it's another quite encouraging result, really, because, pardon me, over the course of the season, there's not many teams you would expect to leave Spain Park with points. So for the Coasters to take something, certainly a sign of what they could do, and interesting as well. I thought that they had a trialist starting up front for them in Henry Jordan, who I believe plays for RAF Lossiemouth, but he'd been recommended to Frank, and he's been sort of in training and that, so maybe he's one to potentially keep an eye out for as well for Lossy.
The contrast with Strathspey, coming back to that from earlier, is Lossy concede a goal but stay in the game and then manage to pick up a point, whereas, like we were saying, Strathspey concede a goal and a second one quickly follows, and that's a little difference between a point here and there over the course of a season in the bottom half of the table.
Yeah. Buckie Thistle 3, Huntly 0. It's 6 unbeaten now. For Buckie, Huntly had the chances early on, didn't take them. Then Scott Adams scored the opener for Buckie on 33 minutes, and it sounded like Alan Hale wasn't particularly happy with Huntly in the second period. Scott Adams, Callum, he's a name that I'm seeing quite frequently. Is he starting regularly for Buckie? Should he be starting regularly?
Well, he starts a fair, last season and this season, starts a fair percentage of games. Some he comes off the bench, but I think with Scott, whether he starts or comes on, he always gives you a threat in behind and a goal threat, and he's always quite lively, good player to have on your side. I think for me, that the way the game panned out and that game panned out on Saturday, and the result is a demonstration of what Buckie are very good at, which is when they get one, they're so good at instantly putting you under more pressure and getting a second very quickly, and then suddenly it's quite a long way back. Like you've seen it, not just this season but previous seasons. But they're very good at, they don't rest when they get a goal. It's like they try and up it a notch again, and for the next 5-10 minutes or whatever, it can really test you. And a lot of the time they'll get a second or sometimes even a third goal. And I think from a Huntly perspective, as Alan Hale touched on a wee bit, you'd be disappointed that, as much as I've said it's a long way back, at 2-0 in the second half, it's kind of old cliche of if you can get the next goal and it kind of makes a game of it, but it seems like they maybe never looked particularly likely, which, given the start that they'd had in the league unbeaten prior to Saturday, that's a bit of a disappointment for the Black and Golds. Yeah,
the other goals in the game, Max Barry and then Darryl McHardy adding the third. He's on the road to 15.
Centre-halves.
Yeah, we poo-pooed that suggestion, but he's had another one. Devonville 1, Forest Mechanics 1. Similar one for me, this one. Devonville, like, similar to what we kind of said about Lossy, they go from like the 9-0 defeat to Fraserburgh, which looks like it was the blip that we suggested it would be. And then they take a point off Forest, who'd been very impressive in previous weeks.
I mean, Craig Stewart must be thrilled, first of all, with the reaction from his players to that 9-0 defeat. That's a very good point for the Banthers. But yeah, Forest were excellent at Spain Park when they beat Bankside in the Cup, so it'll be a huge source of frustration, I'm sure, that they haven't managed to go on and take that form in a league game, because that was a great opportunity for them, I would have thought. But yeah, it's all about Devonville for me. All the plaudits should go to them.
Well, it's a continuation of the same theme, because Callum Frame puts Forest up really early on, and like given how Forest had started and given Vale the previous week, it would have been easy to capitulate.
Then, well, it would. You can say that, but the interesting thing is, on the balance of play, it seemed like Forest being in front at half time and having that early goal was perhaps undeserved. I think if you read and hear what's been said, Forest, Devonvale rather, were the team that enjoyed the better play and were the team more in the ascendancy, although Stephen McDonald felt in the second half the Cans did improve. But I think for Devonville, he's certainly very encouraged by the performance, if maybe a touch frustrated that they didn't manage to take all 3 points. But I mean, as we said last week, it's like for whatever reason, it's like outcome of the 9-0, that wasn't quite the Devon Vale, we'd seen in other games this season, and they've been back more like themselves on Saturday. For Forest, I think maybe easy at times to get slightly carried away in terms of if you go through their side, they are still quite a young side in a lot of areas, and it's maybe, as much as they'll want to, it's maybe asking a lot to expect them to turn up and be outstanding and brushing teams aside every week.
Yeah.
Keith 2 for Martin United 3 at Kynoch Park. For Martin came back from behind twice, despite also having 2 goals but chalked off for offside and missing a penalty. Having a penalty saved. Something significant stats-wise that happened in the game was Graham Rodger, in scoring 2 for Martin, became the first for Martin player in the Highland League era to reach 100 goals.
Yeah, he did with 2 goals, and I mean he's been there 8 years, and he's always been a player that's from midfield, has always sort of been in double figures plus and chipping in, and that's quite an achievement for anyone, but particularly for a midfield player to be you look at some of the players for Martin have had over their time in the Highland League. For Graham to be the first guy to get to 100 goals in that time for the club's an excellent achievement. And I mean, if you look at Saturday's goals, they were clearly important. They were pushed hard by Keith. I mean, Graham actually, I believe, was the offender for Keith's opener, the penalty for handball. But I mean, it's really, for me, it's now a sort of trademark for Martin under Stuart Anderson that they'll find ways to come back and win. We've seen them do it that often, and I mean, with the likes of Graham Rodger, Julian Wade's popped up late on, and the sort of options they have in the forward areas, you can never rule them out, and so it proved. I mean, Keith, be encouraged by the performance, I'm sure, but it is naturally when you've been in front twice in the second half and it was 2-2 going into the sort of closing stages, you'd understandably be disappointed that you've taken nothing from the game, even though it was a good display by what I would say is an improving Keith team.
It's a familiar tale. I mean, you were talking about for Martin finding a way to win. Keith find a way not to. It feels like almost like they get back onto level terms and then concede straight away again, or they get their noses in front and then let a team peg them back. It's Craig Ewan must be tearing his hair out.
Well, on Craig Ewan, not to sort of drum up the ghosts of the past for Highland League Weekly, but I noticed in his post-match comments he was talking about the pressure that was repeatedly put on them from the throw-ins that for Martin were sending in the box. It was like corners, he said. But yes, game management a little bit for them, I suppose. Rothes 0, Brecon City 2. Grady McGrath, 21 minutes, scored the first goal for Brecon. Few Rothes chances then not taken, and Liam Jewell, that name again, made it 2 before the break. Ross Jack, I think, was shown a red card because he believed that one was offside in the aftermath. However, he also said it was because he'd left his technical area and that was the reason he was given for the straight red. But for Brecon, I mean, it's not the flashiest win in the world, but it's a great place to go and win 2-0, isn't it?
You're always happy if you leave McKessick Park with 3 points, I would say. I mean, it's difficult away game ticked off for them this season, and again, talk about goals change games and forward players and things, and Grady McGrath and Liam Jewell also, they've got 2 players that look really sharp at the start of this season and in good form. I think if you're Rothes, be a bit disappointed that you played the last 40 minutes against 10 men with Mark Scott sent off and not really being able to make inroads and get a goal back and can potentially try and turn the screw. So they are maybe in games like that a wee bit just slightly off it. I mean, you kind of gone about giving teams starts as well. That's 2 games running that they've been 2-0 down, and it's asking a lot to then try and come back. Should also give a word mention as well to Jim Walker, who's stepped down as Rothes assistant manager, I believe, due to sort of family commitments, but he's been there throughout Ross Jack's tenure and helped him win a couple of cups and things, and clearly he'll be missed by the Spaysiders.
Penultimate game to discuss. Brora Rangers 1, Inverurie Locos 1. Locos' first point of the league campaign. And afterwards, Andy Lowe said he wouldn't have done this if they'd lost the game, but he felt the refereeing in the game was a little bit against his side, and there were, I think he said, 40 incidents where free kicks should have went the other way. But Brora opened the scoring with a penalty from Paul Brindle. Thomas Reid was sent off for the initial foul, so it must have been no attempt to play the ball, presumably. Johnny Smith then scored late from a corner to equalise. But yeah, Loco is good to get the monkey off the back, I suppose.
Well, it was a good point for them, really, although Andy felt with their performance they could have had more, but a good point for them, especially against a top side in Brora away from home, having played half an hour plus with 10 men. So I mean, the 10 men last week, it seems maybe that's the catalyst for them, is to get a man sent off. I don't know, but the goal, even the equaliser, seems to be dubiety about it. It was given to Glenn Donald, but I have seen evidence which suggests it was Johnny Smith. It was a bit of a scramble anyway, but I think Johnny, being the good striker that he is, absolutely desperate for the goal, so I've given it to him. But in terms of the after-match comments as well, I was quite surprised really with Andy's what he had to say. I mean, 40 incidents, whether that's
I want to see the crime count,
an exact number. I'm not entirely sure, but he clearly felt very unhappy, and I'm sure he's got his reasons for doing it. But we should also say at times as well, it is a hard job refereeing, and they're human like all of us and can't be perfect. And I mean, David Alexander, he's got the brunt of it on Saturday, but it is a difficult job, and sometimes Nairn probably as guilty of it as anyone, sometimes being critical on here about marginal calls, but they do in the main do have a hard job very well, referees, but sometimes you get games or decisions where clearly it doesn't go right. And I mean, David Alexander, if he wants to speak about it, I'm sure would be happy to air his views, but clearly Andy disagreed with quite a number of his calls on Saturday. But I think also from a broader point of view, going back to the game, very frustrating either not to kill it off when you're up against 10 men in the last half hour, or to see it out, because I think as well in the dying embers they had the ball right up sort of in the corner flag area, let Inverurie out, and they've gone up the park and scored sort of last seconds, which Ali McDonald said afterwards, seeing out games like that's the sort of games that can make a difference come the end of the season. So again, the Carter's kind of left with a feeling that it's very much 2 points dropped.
Right, one more game then. Wick Academy 1, Turriff United 5. It sounded like in this one, after Ross Gunn's opener for Wick, that either the Scotties spurned a few chances, but also that Turriff keeper David Day made quite a few saves and ultimately kept his team in the game. You've then got Ewan Clark teeing up John Allen, heard that already this season, to equalise for United before the break. Allen then scores another, and they kind of end up running away with it a little bit, Turriff. But we knew Turriff had that goal threat, but through David Day, they've had to show like a little bit of resilience at the back.
You're away from home. You're going to need your goalkeeper in action, and David Day's a good shot stopper. What I would say about this one is, for me, this shows the progress that Turriff United are making, because Wick away is always a tough one for any team in the Highland League. But for Dean Donaldson's side to go there, lose the first goal and go behind, that reaction, he'll be absolutely thrilled with that from his side. For Wick, it maybe shows the work that they've got ahead of them this season.
I mean, it's a bit of a game of two halves, because it's not even some of the chances I don't think were even after Ross Gunn's opener, but sort of right through the early stages. And I mean, Dean Donaldson said it as well, Turriff got out of jail a wee bit, really, going in 1-1 at half time, because I mean, you had Jack Halday hit the crossbar, plus saves for David Day, and I mean, Gary Manson said like afterwards, if you were going on chances, the game could have finished 5-5, but he says the difference was Turriff took theirs and punished Wick in the second half, when Wick could have been in a really strong position had they taken their opportunities. But I mean, more good signs for Turriff, 4 wins out of 6 in the league, and I mean Neil Gould's been out injured since the first day of the season, but John Allen and Ewan Clark certainly making up for his absence. They look like they've got the makings of a really good partnership.
John Allen perhaps showing other managers that there's talent out there in Island football to be tapped up potentially.
Well, there is. I mean, if you're speaking about Island football, Gary tries his best with Wick, but it's obviously, I mean, as you've seen previously on this programme, it's slightly different with John because he's now obviously on the mainland, so it's easier for him, whereas if you're actually trying to get players commuting from the islands, say, it's a lot more problematic. Alright,
well, that's all the weekend's fixtures discussed. So let's have a look at the Breedon Highland League table after 5 games all the sides have now played.